Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This is where we take your source material, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we really dig in to find the key knowledge, the core insights, our aim to get you up to speed quickly, maybe with a few surprising details you didn't expect. So today we're diving into a very specific type of source. It's excerpts from William Boericke's classic Homeopathic Materia Medica, and we're focusing specifically on one substance, Ampelopsis quinquefolia.
That's right. And for this deep dive, our mission really is to explore what this particular historical text tells us about this substance. We'll be looking at the traditional uses it describes, the specific symptoms that are associated with it in this system, and any kind of unique details that jump out from the source.
Okay, and right away, the source gives us the common name, Virginia creeper. I mean, you probably recognize that one, right? Climbing up walls, trees.
Yeah, very common plant.
Maybe not the first thing you'd think of as having medicinal uses.
Well, true, but many traditional remedies do come from everyday plants. What's interesting here is how the source lists conditions that, and I'm quoting loosely here, have been benefited by this drug. It mentions renal dropsies, that's basically swelling, often linked to kidney problems,
Not dropsies, yeah.
and hydrocele, which is a collection of fluid, typically in the scrotum. It also lists chronic hoarseness.
Hoarseness, okay.
Yeah, especially it notes in scrofulous patients. Now, scrofulous is an older term, often referred to people who are prone to things like glandular swelling or maybe even tuberculosis.
Okay. That makes sense in historical context.
And finally, it also notes choleric symptoms, suggesting pretty severe digestive issues, maybe resembling cholera.
Wow, okay. So it covers quite a range then, from kidney and fluid things to respiratory, like the hoarseness, and even really acute digestive distress. What about the more specific physical symptoms described? These old texts can be incredibly precise sometimes.
They really can. The source mentions some general things first, like soreness in all the limbs and the back feeling sore too, but then it gets quite specific. It notes the left costal region.
So the ribs area on the left.
Exactly, over the ribs on the left side, as being particularly sore, sensitive even, and it also specifies pain right in the elbow joints. This kind of localized detail is often considered quite significant in this type of literature.
Left rib pain and elbow pain. Yeah, that level of specificity is pretty interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And you mentioned digestive symptoms, the choleric ones. Can you elaborate a bit on what the source says there?
Yes, absolutely. Tying back to those choleric symptoms, the source explicitly describes vomiting and also purging with tenesmus. So purging meaning severe diarrhea.
Right.
And tenesmus is that awful feeling, that straining, like you need to empty your bowels even when there's nothing left. Really distressing.
Yeah, sounds it.
It also mentions rumbling in the abdomen. So yeah, it paints quite a picture of acute gastrointestinal upset.
Okay. And there was one other detail I noticed that really stood out. Something about a specific time things get worse.
Yes, you picked up on that. This is where you see that really characteristic detail often found in these texts. It notes symptoms are generally worse about 6 p.m.
6 p.m. That's specific.
Yes. A specific time aggravation like that is a classic element in these materia medica descriptions. It was seen as a really important distinguishing feature of how a remedy might act according to this system.
So if we put all these pieces together, just from this Boericke source, Ampelopsis quinquefolia, or Virginia creeper, it's described as traditionally used for things like kidney-related swelling, hydrocele, that chronic hoarseness.
Right.
Along with the severe cholera-like symptoms.
Correct.
And the specific symptoms linked to it are that general soreness that then localizes to the left, ribs and elbows, the severe digestive upset, vomiting, purging, tenesmus, dilated pupils were mentioned too.
Dilated pupils, yes, that's in there.
And that very curious 6 p.m. worsening of symptoms.
Precisely. That sums up the symptom picture described. And for anyone interested in the, let's say, the practical application details within this specific source, it suggests using the substance in the second to third potency.
Potency. And in homeopathy, that refers to the dilution and shaking process.
Exactly. Right? It's a specific measure of preparation described in the text, indicating a relatively lower potency in this case.
Okay. So wrapping up this quick deep dive into Boericke on Ampelopsis quinquefolia, we've got the common name, Virginia creeper, the traditional uses listed, renal dropsies, hydrocele, chronic hoarseness, choleric symptoms. We covered the specific symptoms, the left-sided soreness, the general limb back elbow pain, those intense digestive issues with kinesmus, dilated pupils.
And that very distinct 6 p.m. aggravation time.
Right. And the suggested potency in this source being the second to third.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. When you look at these kinds of historical texts like Boericke's, and you see this intense focus on such, minute details, like pain in one specific spot, the left ribs or symptoms getting reliably worse at exactly 6 p.m., what does that kind of precise observation tell us about how the effects of substances were being studied and recorded within that particular framework? It really makes you think about the depth, or at least the type of detail captured in this kind of source material.